just generally the need to start thinking and planning strategically for ageing within the housing sector, because the Lord Select Committee in 2013 had noted to us that we were woefully underprepared for ageing in the housing sector. And recent research that's been done by Cash and Lord Best around dementia has shown that we're still, unfortunately, rather woefully prepared still, because we are not taking the steps for rigorous and integrated inclusive design. And we're not geared up yet for supporting really key groups like those living with dementia. So today we're looking at the idea of inclusive living as a concept, but I'm also going to present to you the inclusive living planning tool that was developed with the Scottish Federation of Housing Associations. And this concept was also co-produced with the Scottish housing sector themselves, because there's a lot of motivation, there's a lot of enthusiasm, and there's a lot of best practice out there in regards to housing organisations supporting people who are ageing, but just supporting getting their homes more flexible, inclusive, and just generally ready for this ageing demographic, which it's not changed. We've known we've got an ageing population for quite a long time. So the question is, why are we still woefully underprepared? So what I present to you is really quite a creative rethinking around the idea of inclusion, accessibility and flexibility for housing, to start to think about accessibility a lot sooner in our processes of development and repair and maintenance in the housing sector, because people are still, unfortunately, in many cases, inappropriate housing. I did a study in the Stirling area, for example, and we were looking at owner-occupiers at this point in particular. And in the Stirling area, we found owner-occupiers in lower value properties. Around a third of them, a whole third, were in properties where there was part of that property they couldn't access. So that indicates that there are still people in homes that are not supporting their health needs or changing health needs at the moment. And really at this stage, and with the vision for housing by 2040, we do actually have to address that and plan much longer term to support us all as we age. And I say support us all, importantly, because we're all stakeholders in ageing. We're all getting older all of the time. It's one of the inevitable things about life. So if we're not planning for ageing, it means you're not even planning for yourself or your family or your communities to take things further and be ready to be in a home that supports you as you age, rather than you having to adapt to your home. And this is where the idea of inclusive living came around. And we started this journey with SFHA in the Innovation and Future Thinking Forum. And it's just trying to think of doing things slightly differently. And the idea is that we're not focusing, when we're thinking about inclusion, on one group of people, although my research focuses a lot on housing for older people. My approach to that isn't that's just housing for older people. It's actually when you make steps towards a more inclusive approach in housing and inclusive design, looking at social connections, thinking about community connections and integrating services, you're really just making it better for everyone. And the more inclusive we are, it's not just about one group, because that's really easy to dismiss then. Oh, it's just housing for older people. Oh, it's just housing for people with dementia, or it's just housing for people with learning difficulties. In fact, if we take some steps towards inclusion, it's good for all these groups, and indeed everyone. So yeah, that's where we came from. So it's a vision, first of all, and we did quite a thorough literature review around inclusive living, and the themes that came out highlighted that if you want to be inclusive and take an inclusive living approach, you need all of these different elements. You have to think about physical space and design, and that's accessibility, adaptability of internal and wider environment spaces, technology, a really big thing, sustainability, green spaces and quality, everyone friendly, universal design. You also have to look at connections and relationships, social connectedness at individual, community and service level, relationships, partnerships, integration with individuals and support services, transitions through spaces, and of course, independent living and supporting people's independent ambitions. I mean, the idea is, well, you could have a really lovely designed home, but if you can't get out of it and connect to your community and other people, then that's also a big challenge. And of course, we can't forget the structural barriers to inclusion, representing all groups. And this idea of co-production, which is always trying to have the voices of service users in the processes, because that includes or kind of revolutionizes the ownership of the changes and design elements that you may be developing. And of course, because we're in housing, the importance of safety and well-being is also, of course, an important point of inclusive living. So what we did with SVHA was that we co-designed this with many partners, and the enthusiasm and motivation is there. But the idea was, okay, so if you have a vision, how do you then practically implement that vision? And what was developed was this toolkit that you see before you. And we take each of these sections in the toolkit at different points. And we've asked inclusive living ambassadors to get involved and kind of put their hands up to have a look at that evidence and facilitate and connect people within different housing organisations. The real magic starts when you start to think about inclusive living between the silos, maybe between finance sections and the allocation sections, the repairs and maintenance sections, the void sections within housing organisations. And then you come together to realise that there can be decisions that are made much earlier in the processes that lead you towards more of an inclusive approach to design, connections and relationships and social inclusion and equality. So the toolkit sets up for these ambassadors facilitated sessions to do this, how to go that can then implement those that you do. So say, for example, you're looking to facilitate a conversation here about supporting inclusion. You would go through, okay, we've considered wealth inequality, we've considered income inequality, age-friendly design. Oh, but a gap might be dementia-friendly design. And then there's some food for thought for discussion. This one's just an example of universal design. And then it takes you to the guidance. More guidance. We don't have a lack of guidance around inclusive design and its elements around it. What we don't have is one all-comprehensive one. So what the toolkit does is try to bring it together so you can see the gaps, because we all start from different places. Each organisation has different contexts. And then the toolkit, all these different areas, and you can choose different areas to home in on. You can have these conversations with your board, with the management teams, with tenant scrutiny panels. It's the idea is that you adapt this for facilitating important conversations, which will lead you to see where the gaps are, have inclusive living discussions, discuss different evidence, and then see the guidance on regards to what your ambitions are. Here's one on accessing all areas, looking at gardens, halls, some food for thought here from Kate, more quick win ideas. And the idea is that you see the gaps, but you also commit to making the changes that you discuss. So this quick win idea is Dementia Design. At Stirling University, we're always talking about dementia design and colour contrast.